Hello, everyone. Welcome back with Resident Evil Requiem just around the corner, releasing this month on February 27th. Decided to do a tier list. I know there's many tier lists out there, but this is my own personal tier list that I wanted to create. I have a very fond memories of this franchise. It's if not one of the top tier franchises that I actually like for survival horror. You know, and a franchise by itself though next to Castlevania, because since I love horror games, one of the games that really got me into it was Resident Evil 3 back on the PlayStation 1. Well, and that's where I am going to start, okay? But with that being said, this is my own personal tier list. If you agree with them, if you don't agree with them, that's great. You have the freedom to like what you want to like. But I do want to hear from you. Why? There's probably that one personal Resident Evil game that you actually adore, or have very fond memories of, and I actually like to hear that down in the comments. So, with that being said, I am going to start with the PlayStation One of all the Resident Evils. Okay, and my first one was Resident Evil 3 Nemesis. That actually got me into the franchise. So with Resident Evil 1 and 2 actually out, already out and everything, I was able to secure Resident Evil 3 from one of my cousins. So, and with that one, I actually liked a lot of systems with it because to me back in the day, it felt like it had modern controls. I was able to control, and going back to the other ones when I talked about them, but with Resident Evil 3, it really felt like a modern game to me back then. The controls were good. The system where you can actually choose your different path, especially when you face Nemesis, if you wanted to fight him or not, or the little multiple choice system that was there. Um, but with that being said, though, I was introduced to Joe Valentine for the first time, Brad Vickers, and I didn't even know what was going on. I just knew that there was a city worn torn with zombies in it, and I had a blast. Okay. With this being a very fond memory of it, I am ranking Resident Evil 3 in A tier. It really got me into the franchise quite a bit. Modern controls, great unlockables, especially the mercenaries mode. Um, so there's a lot to this game that brings a lot of fond memories that I still even have my original disc even today. Sorry, my mouth gets dry pretty quickly. The next game I actually played next was Resident Evil 2, and for those who remember Blockbuster, I actually rented Resident Evil 2 on the PlayStation 1 at Blockbuster. I actually finished that one, but it actually freaked me out a little bit more when I was a child for some weird reason, because it felt like it was a little bit more claustrophobic, more tight knit, you know. And for some reason, Nemesis was scary, but he wasn't as scary as William Birkin for some reason back when I was a kid. So, but I did like the whole two disc system, what they did, where you could play with Leon A and Claire B, or Claire B and Leon A, or vice versa, or whatever. But I did like that system, and it had with being able to play with multiple playthroughs. Sadly, I started with Leon first, and then Claire next. So with that being said, I was only able to play it once. Later down the road, I was able to pick it up again digitally, basically on the PlayStation Store on PlayStation 3, and replayed it again and did it that way as well. But even though it didn't have some of the modern controls that Resident Evil 3 had, it actually had a lot more content. It had a really good story, in my opinion, compared to 3. More cohesive, tons of content, and so much, if not, I felt like back in the day this was the perfect Resident Evil. Compared to 3, it was a small step back. It was actually a quicker game. The Resident Evil 3 Nemesis was a quicker game for me compared to 2. But again, this game will be going to S tier. I just think that if this was the pinnacle for it, even though I played 3 first, I think this was the pinnacle for it. Lastly, Resident Evil. Okay. This one's gonna go straight B tier. Is the first of the franchise. Control, when I first actually got my hands on it, again via a rental, when I first got my hands on it, it did feel a little cheesy. You know, it did feel the game like it was the first game. You know, I understand that going from three to two to one probably was a big mistake for me, and it could have ruined the whole franchise for me from just playing Resident Evil. But I liked the series so much from going backwards and uncovering the story over time. Resident Evil felt like it was a mystery, you know, instead of, you know, the whole, you know, the city being destroyed in two games. Resident Evil felt like a mystery game where you go into a mansion, you're trying to uncover all the secrets while trying to survive the abominations um, that the Umbrella Corporation created. So, again, it could have ruined the whole franchise for me, but it didn't. Actually, it encouraged me to play more of them over time. You know, it didn't. You know, it didn't ruin the experience for me. Yeah, the controls weren't as great. Um, the graphics weren't as great. You know, but it was the first one, and I understood that when I was little. Okay, but the next one I played later on down the road, way later on down the road, and that was gonna be Resident Evil Survivor. For me, when I played Resident Evil Survivor, it really is a D tier. Some people actually, I've seen people do like this game, and actually, there's some people actually this was their first Resident Evil because it was like the last of the PS1 Resident Evils, their last ditch effort to milk the PlayStation 1 Resident Evil, basically. Um, as far as the storyline goes, I mean, it's there's some good things about it, which add context to certain things here and there, especially how it created the what was it, um, the Mr. X models, or the Tyrant models, I should say. Sorry, the Tyrant models that are in Resident Evil 2. So it was a nice callback to that and some more world building per se. Okay, that was good for it. But other than that, though, playing it, not when if you had the light gun, it probably was a lot more fun. I didn't have the light gun, so I just played it with the controller and everything. But it really wasn't. It was a very quick experience. It was a very simple experience, and besides story context, it really was like a one and done type of thing. You know, yeah, they tried the whole pathways throughout the story, but it just wasn't my cup of tea per se, you know, until later on, which we'll get to another one here shortly. Next one's gonna be a GBA one. I didn't play this one until way later, and way later in terms of like emulation. Okay, so that's gonna be Resident Evil Gaiden. This one here is gonna be another D tier one, but for some reason, for how the combat system it actually wasn't bad for what the GBA was capable of. I did like the combat system, but the music got repetitive. The graphics were actually not bad for the Game Boy Color, you know. And so if I had actually had the actual cartridge and actually was playing on an actual Game Boy back in the day, I probably would have been blown away by it. But graphically it was fine. Audio wise, there was only like about 5 tracks, it feels like. So Resident Evil Gaiden is a D tier for me. Barry Byrne, Leon Kennedy, they finally meet up, go on a cruise, get a bioweapon out, and it was pretty clear, cut and dry, you know. That's just me. So I have really not much to say about Gaiden in terms of that. So next one is gonna be the PS2 and GameCube eras. Okay. And with that being said, the one that I've got, the first Resident Evil I got for the PS2 was Resident Evil Code Veronica. I know it released on the Dreamcast first, but I didn't have a Dreamcast. I had to wait until Code Veronica X came out. And Resident Evil Code Veronica X, to me, that's an A tier. Okay, it was difficult. Some people will probably put this down to B tier because it was very difficult. There was a lot of soft locks you can get yourself into, but I didn't experience those soft locks. I was a lot more older, so I didn't really experience that as much, or at all, really. But, you know, it was a lot harder compared to Resident Evil 1, 2, or 3. You know, I thought 3 was harder than 2, and I thought 2 was harder than 1, you know, because of Nemesis. Nemesis was aggressive, but in here, you know, the odds were stacked against you. You could have ran out of ammo pretty quickly. The bow gun sucked. To me, it sucked, you know, and you had very limited options and weaponry early in game. So, with that being said, though, Code Veronica X, you know, and it also continued the story because I felt that 1 and 2, like Code Veronica X, continue the story of Resident Evil 1 and 2, and of course it does, you know. So I just wanted to, you know, continue experiencing the lore and expand upon it, and that's great. So again, the only downside for it was Steve Burnside per se. So if they ever do a remake, hopefully they make Steve Burnside a better character per se and actually flesh him out. Like they fleshed him out a little bit, but I think they could do more for him. But the whole Chris Redfield, Albert Wesker fight, the whole the Ashford family, you know, they could really expand upon it. I mean, Code Veronica X to me, it was a big game. You know, I thought it was just on Rockford Island. Nope, it's going in Antarctica too. So, but again, gameplay was great, and graphically it was great for its time. Story expanded upon, and so on and so forth. But yeah, I'm going to give it an A tier on that one. Gun Survivor 2, I actually never played, so I'm going to skip that one. From the gameplay I've seen, it's just an upgraded version of Survivor 1, and I think this was in the arcade, but don't hold me to it if it was. If it was, if it wasn't, it wasn't. Okay. But the next one I'm going to do is, what do we call it? Dead Aim. Sorry, Resident Evil Dead Aim. And I am going to give that one a B tier. I actually have fond memories of Dead Aim. It's actually a really good improvement. I didn't have a gun com or whatever they used for this game. I mean, I still have a copy of it of my own right now. I think I've done a short for it. But with that being said, though, it's a little generic. I will say that. The main character, you know, there's really not much to him. Same thing with his psychic. No, I shouldn't say psychic, but the female protagonist. You know, they're not really fleshed out as they should be. I believe that's my opinion. Story wise, though, it does give you more context of like them of Umbrella. I don't know why I said Umbrella using cruise ships to transport the bioweapons across, you know, the ocean and try to get things done with that way. Their evil deeds that way. So it was a nice context of that, along with an evil villain who used to work for Umbrella, you know, using the bioweapons for his own purpose, for his own reason and stuff. So gameplay wise, it's actually not bad. It was, again, another short adventure on that one. Graphically, good for its time. Actually, I thought Code Veronica was better graphically. Story-wise, Code Veronica's better. But some people probably have some fond memories of this one. I do have fond memories of this one as well. I'm glad I actually did experience it when it actually released. Was it worth the $50? Maybe 30 for how quick it is. You know, it felt a little bit rushed. I will say that. All right. But the next 2 ones, I do have very fun memories and tons of hours of online gameplay. And I'm glad that there's a community out there that actually still plays it. Okay. And that's going to be Resident Evil Online or Resident Evil Outbreak and Outbreak File 2. I'm going to do both of them at the same time. Okay. And the improvements, and I'm going to give Resident Evil Outbreak a B and Resident Evil Outbreak File 2 an A. Because File 2, but while playing both of them, I believe File 2 improved so much of the first game that it just ranks it above higher. And it's nice that I was able to play my 5 scenarios into File 2. File 2 had a lot more unlockables. It was, and that's where I put most of my hours, was in File 2. You know, I put my hours in Outbreak, but not as much as File 2, because it was if not the pinnacle for the online version of Resident Evil. I wish they do a remake. I wish they actually go back to this sub series, because it gave normal Raccoon City civilians a storyline. You know, those that experienced the destruction of Raccoon City from their eyes. So that's why I loved about the Outbreak series, because it was untold stories. That's basically what it was. Untold stories of Raccoon City. Yeah, it could have benefited from voice chat, but they did what they did with the lib system. Back in the day, you know, there was no voice chat for this game, and all you had to do, I mean, you were literally by yourself in your room and using the lib system to talk to people. You know, was it ideal? No, because you got games like Soulcom, or I'm trying to think what other online games, like I think Call of Duty Big Red 1 or something, that had online voice features, but it wasn't. But Resident Evil did not. You know, just examples. Okay. But it was fun. It was put a lot of hours into it. Gameplay, you know, you only had, like, depending on the character, each character was useful in some way, shape, or actually, never mind. There's like maybe 2 of them that actually did suck. So, and you guys probably know who weren't that good. And one of them was Jim. Jim wasn't a really useful character in my opinion. Besides just playing dead. that helped them a lot. But with that being said, though, each character was unique. They had their own backstories. They had their own, and I didn't even notice until like way later down the road, their own friendship system, basically, where one character likes another character or 2 other characters, but hated working with another one. You know, things of that nature. And that I didn't know it was that deep of a system. You know. With the second one, they added walking while shooting, the first ever in a Resident Evil game. Walking and shooting was revolutionary in my mind for this franchise. So, and that eventually gets further on with another gun coming up here shortly. So, so there's a lot of fond memories with Resident Evil Outbreak and File 2. So that's why they're B and A tier retrospectively. Now going to GameCube. These next 2 ones I didn't get. Resident Evil and Resident Evil 0 I didn't get until Resident Evil 4. I got my GameCube around maybe 2005 when Resident Evil 4 released. So when I got Resident Evil 4, I bought Resident Evil 0 and Resident Evil, you know. So with that being said, I'm going to start with the original Resident Evil, and this one here to me is S tier. The way they handled the this Resident Evil remake, from what it was phenomenal. You know, graphically looked great. Like the GameCube had a lot of power compared to the PS2. Like that's why they couldn't import. That's why they didn't import Resident Evil. To me, that's why they never port Resident Evil and Resident Evil 0 to the PS2, because they couldn't handle it. They were able to port Resident Evil 4, but it was technically limited to a certain degree. So with Resident Evil, though, graphically it was great. Gameplay was such a good improvement. Even like with the defensive weapons that it came with, like the defense, like if a zombie grabbed you, you're able to get a dagger, put it in their face, or a stun grenade or frag grenade, and put it in their mouth and watch their head blow up and stuff. So there's a lot of deeper mechanics on top of it, but they changed it up even more, where you got Crimson Head zombies that reanimate and are faster and deadlier with claws. You know, they really changed it up to the point where this is a brand new game. This is a retelling of Resident Evil, retelling of Resident Evil in a better place, okay, or a better situation per se. So, but yeah, with that being said, though, with this Resident Evil, it was, if not the top notch for me, and this is S tier with gameplay, storytelling. Like they improved the storytelling. They even said the whole Lisa Trevor story. Like they gave Lisa Trevor a storyline. You know, they gave the Trevor family a storyline in this game really well and capitalized on them even further, which expands into the remake series of RE2 remake and RE3 remake and RE4 remake. You know, so Resident Evil 0 and 1 as them. I mean, I'm hoping they don't remake these two games. Honestly, in my opinion, Resident Evil and Resident Evil 0 don't need a remake. So that's my opinion, though. But again, great gameplay, great graphics, great. It just expands upon the experience. It gives a better atmosphere of the Spencer Mansion. It gives a better mystery overall. Yeah, I played Resident Evil 1, but the Resident Evil remake just expands upon the mystery even more. So, but Resident Evil 0, okay, I am gonna give it a B tier though. Alright. And I hate to say that because I was actually looking forward to Resident Evil 0, but with I can understand the gameplay balances what they had to do because each character had 6 slots, so you had a total of 12. So, but certain guns or certain equipment took 2 slots, so that took a lot of inventory already out of you. Yeah, you could put down items and stuff like that, which is great, so you could pick it up later. You could put down certain items in certain rooms since you knew it was safe and come back to them later and go back and forth. So there was a lot of backtracking, and if not, there was more backtracking in Resident Evil 0 than any other Resident Evil that I've ever played. I backtracked so much to the point where you got a little bit bored. The hot swap feature that they had was a nice touch for it because I could have Billy Cohen go to a different room and explore this side of the facility, or Rebecca go to this side of the facility and figure things out. But eventually they have to reconverge and figure more things out and to progress the storyline. So, and overall the story had a lot more context to the very beginning, especially James Marcus and his involvement with Umbrella and how the T-virus actually got into Arklay Mountains. It was James Marcus's fault, or his little leech clone after he died, to spread the virus on the train, in the forest, and in the mansion. So but at least it gives us context on what this Resident Evil, how things started. Okay, that's what I'm trying to say. I should go back to the whole 2 characters in both Resident Evil and Resident Evil 1, and I kind of forgot about this. I actually enjoyed too. Having 2 different playable characters, Chris Redfield and Jill Valentine, and especially in the remake, it's phenomenal. It gave more replayability, gave me 2 campaigns, just like Resident Evil 2 gave me 2 campaigns. Resident Evil 1, Resident Evil Code Veronica gave me a long campaign, so just want to clear that one up because I actually forgot about that point. The next one, Resident Evil 4, okay? With Resident Evil 4, okay, and I am gonna, with Resident Evil 4 and Resident Evil 4 Remake, one of them is going to get A tier and one of them is going to get S tier. And once I place this one, you may like it, you may not, But Resident Evil 4, to me, is now A tier compared to Resident Evil 4. Resident Evil 4 was revolutionary back in the day. When I first played it, having the non-fixed camera angles was different. It started a whole third-person, over-the-shoulder gameplay. The action gameplay. So this was a turning point for Resident Evil, where it went from survival horror to action survival horror. With Leon being the cool, badass guy going on a mission to save the president's daughter. But again, gameplay was fluid and smooth back in the day. The story expanded upon the story, felt like a continuation of a storyline because we haven't seen Leon Kennedy since Resident Evil 2. So it was great to see him again. Well, I shouldn't say that. If you play Gaiden, then yeah. But some people, I don't, some people say that's canon or not canon. It depends. I think they said it's non-canon. But with the actual 4, though, it is an actual genuine continuation of Resident Evil 4. So it's good to see him back in action, and he gets. I mean, with Resident Evil 4, it made him even more popular. He's, if not the popular, hero of the franchise. You know, he's back in Resident Evil Requiem. You know, a lot older, a lot smarter, a lot faster, you know, things of that nature. You know, Chris had his limelight in Resident Evil 7 and 8 from all the games he was in. Chris Redfield has a lot of spotlight in the games, but Leon has too. Like, those are the two main characters of the game, of the franchise, I will say, in my opinion. So, but go off track. Going back to Resident Evil 4, though. With Resident Evil 4, though, again, gameplay, graphics, storytelling, just everything about it felt perfect back in the day, you know, where, you know, you can really experiment with different things, try, like you could have even done things that you couldn't have done back from 4, like, there's things I learned in 4 where you could have done 4 remake that you could have done the original Resident Evil 4. Hold on. So, with that being said, though, Resident Evil 4 was a long game. I will say that it was a little bit more linear per se compared to remake, and you know, compared to RE remake. But there was some backtracking, but not a lot. So yeah. But Resident Evil 4, A tier. These next 2 ones is going to be the light gun games, Resident Evil Umbrella Chronicles and Darkside Chronicles. And within both of these are actually going to go in B tier. Okay. To me, they're really great games. They're really great light gun games. Okay. They are. I played both of these on the Wii. And then I bought them again later on for the PlayStation 3 with the PlayStation Move, if anyone remembers that. But with the Wii, though, they were good additional storytellings. Like with the Resident Evil Umbrella Chronicles, you got Wesker's side, you got Wesker's point of view before Resident Evil 5. I think that came out. Yeah, I think Resident Evil Umbrella Chronicles came out in 07, I believe. And I know Resident Evil 5 came out in 09. But you got a side of the story of Wesker. And then in Resident Evil Darkside Chronicles, you got the storyline of Leon Kennedy and Krauser. Before Krauser was evil in Resident Evil 4. Like when you met Krauser in Resident Evil 4, you didn't know who the heck he was. You know, all you knew that he was a buddy of Leon Kennedy back when they went back in a different operation or something, you know? And so you were confused, like who the heck was Krauser? So it was nice. It was a nice touch from 4 to Darkside Chronicles to learn about Krauser a lot more, you know, and what changed them to be evil, you know. But it did have a lot of bonuses. It had a lot of replayability. It's just a normal light gun game, you know. So graphically, I think Umbrella Chronicles was better. For some reason, Darkside Chronicles had the famous piss filter in games that were famous back in the day, like Resident Evil 5 was one of them. You know, it was like very greenish or darkish per se, so it was hard to see things here and there. But Umbrella Chronicles was a lot brighter in my opinion. But overall, those 2 games expanded and retold a lot of the things. Okay, so but again, they're just light gun games. At the end of the day, with the Resident Evil franchise being retold again. So, this one, Resident Evil 5, is going to go in A tier. I have so much fond memories of Resident Evil 5, okay? Is besides the Outbreak series having online co-op, Resident Evil 5 was Resident Evil 4 with co-op. and me and a buddy of mine, we played this on launch day for 24 hours straight, almost 24 hours straight. We took our breaks in between, but we played it so much we beat it within like 2 or 1.5 days on normal difficulty. Again, it's just Resident Evil 4 with it's Resident Evil 5 is just or Resident Evil 5 is just Resident Evil 4 with co-op. So it's great. It was a great experience. It was a great online experience. I have very fond memories of this game with my buddy. Me and him played this game along with the next one that's going to be coming up. So we played both of them co-op and beat them co-op. Okay, but within a week though, we platinum. We platinum Resident Evil 5. We were that dedicated. We were really fun. We were very fond memories. That's how we became friends. Is our love for Resident Evil. Okay, because his favorite was Leon Kennedy. Mine was Chris Redfield. So I played Chris Redfield. He played Sheva Alomar. I think it was Alomar. Forgot the last name. Sorry. But we played co-op. We played this game. Even once we found out there was DLC for it, we played the heck out of DLC because it made some fun memories of the original Resident Evil and stuff like that. It's like there was a lot of good callbacks and Easter eggs and everything. So it was a very fun experience, a very fun experience. This is why for me it's an A tier. Some people might not like it, but I do. So Resident Evil 6 though, on the other hand, this is actually gonna go in B tier. Again, it was a fun online experience. If you have a friend, and same thing with Resident Evil 5, if you have a friend, it makes the experience 10 times better. Okay. Resident Evil 6, gameplay-wise, was great. Like, you had more freedom of movement. It was more faster paced, but it did lose its identity quite a bit. It does expand the whole Wesker story with Jake. It expands the story of Chris Redfield during his BSAA days and losing people, and his own mental health deteriorating because of it. Same thing with Leon Kennedy in terms of trying to protect the president and going and getting himself into another situation, and the whole story about Ada Wong and her clone, or not her clone, I shouldn't say her clone, but her the main villain. Well, there's multiple main villains. It feels like Resident Evil 6. They just threw everything at you. Like, it had tons of content, but they threw so much at you, so much information, so many characters. It was kind of at times convoluted and like just too much for the player. I would say just way too much for the player, but it was still fun co-op wise. It was still a fun game to play cooperatively with your buddy. So again, but graphically, gameplay, it was actually really great for what it was back in the PS3 days, PS3 and Xbox 360 days. It was great looking. It was gameplay. It was very smooth, very fluid. Like, you can't deny that Resident Evil 6, its gameplay was fluid for what they changed from 4 and 5 to now. From that, it was very, very, very fluid. So the next ones I'm gonna go. I know I talked about one portable. These are the next few portables that actually I shouldn't say Revelations 2 really wasn't portable to a certain degree, but I'm going to talk about the Revelations the Revelations sub-series. Okay, so with Revelations 1, okay, Revelations 1 to me is S tier. Okay, again, multiple characters are introduced. It was a great handheld experience. That's how I experienced Revelations, was on the DS. Okay. But 3DS, I should say, because the whole 3D capabilities and stuff. But it was a great way. To me, it was a great way to play it. I know they ported it multiple times onto console, Switch, PS4, Xbox One, all that good stuff. But if you really want to play on how it was, the 3DS was the one to play it as. But that's how I first experienced it. Great 3D it had. The character, there wasn't really a lot of enemy designs. That's one thing I kind of griped about though. But the story continued on with Chris Redfield, Jill Valentine, the BSAA, and how it started and what happened during that time. So it did a lot of good things to incorporate more of the overarching story of Resident Evil, especially the BSAA side of things. Okay? Resident Evil 2, well, Resident Evil Revelations 2, though, I am gonna give it a B tier. Okay, I know there's a lot of A's, there's a lot of S's, and there's lots of B's, but I'm giving it a B tier because the story wasn't as good. I will say the whole episodic thing was okay. Um, I don't know. It just felt like it felt like it didn't push or change things of what Revelation was, because Revelations it wasn't revolutionary. Revolution. It wasn't revolutionary though, but it was unique. This one, it felt like, yeah, you're stuck on a island, basically playing, like, if people haven't played it, 9 doors, 9 people, 9 whatever, that game, 999. Okay. um it felt like that game, to a certain degree, because people survive, people die along the way, people mutate because of the little bracelet they had because of the sphere and stuff. But it did expand upon the other Wesker that people didn't know about. They put, what was it, Alex Wesker into the fold. So it was a nice little touch on that one, and there's a possibility that, she may or may not be still alive. Again, spoilers, so with, like, I don't know. I just really don't have much fond memories of 2. It also took a while for it to actually release in terms of the episodic matters, because I think I bought them separately, I believe, not as the complete. Like I bought the complete package, but I had to wait. And when that was happening, certain other games came out during that time, and I kind of forgot about it, which sucks. So I couldn't play it all the way through. So when I did later on Steam, I played it all the way through, because it was the complete package. Next one, 3D Mercenaries. It's Mercenaries in 3D. There's nothing much to it. It's a fun co-op game, to play with your buddy. But I mean, this is the first C1, but it's not really special per se. It's just Mercenaries. It's basically taking Resident Evil 5 Mercenaries and just dialing it up a few, because Resident Evil 5 is when it became the Gold Edition, and you got the Lost and Nightmares DLC. That you got tons of additional characters to play as. Even Resident Evil 6 had tons of characters to play as, tons of levels to go to. Resident Evil 3D's Mercenaries 3D just rehashed a lot of that. And then, yeah, had certain other characters that were unique to that game right there. It just wasn't. It was, yeah, like I said, it's just Resident Evil 3D Mercenaries. I can't really say anything bad or good about it. It was just that, The last one I want to talk about is, if not compared to Resident Evil, the remake, if you really want to play the original Resident Evil, this is the way to play it. And I wish I still had this game. I really do, because it was my favorite DS game, and it was Resident Evil Deadly Silence. And this is actually going to go in the S tier. Okay, so hear me out. You can do they really did a lot of things to improve the original experience. Okay, so if you want to play the original experience, this is the way to go. Okay, but you can play the original experience as such, or you can play as like the rebirth mode, where you can actually use the touch screen to like slice the enemies with a knife, or some of the puzzles you had to blow into the mic or turn knobs and all this other good stuff. Like there was a lot of interactive stuff for this game. It blew my mind when I actually first got this game, when it first released, playing this game, and I'm like, I'm spending hours. I'm like, this is like, and this is after. I think this is after the actual Resident Evil remake. So I was really dedicated to playing the original Resident Evil, and this is the way to play it. The way to play it. It still had the same corny dialogue, still had the same, um, voice acting or dialogue, voice acting, the same thing. But it had all the same unique stuff, all the same stuff of Resident Evil, and also had better controls too. And you can do certain interactive stuff in the actual what call it, the on the actual touchpad stuff. And then on top of that, you have the map on the top screen along with your inventory. Like you can actually look at what you have currently equipped and how much ammunition. So it was very innovative for its time, for the 3D for the DS counterpart. So I will suggest, if you want to play the original experience, you can go the original Resident Evil. Okay, you can go play it, have fun. But I will suggest go play Deadly Science. May it be emulation or picking it up physically. Sadly, physically is expensive. I would not suggest it to a certain degree. But if you are able to pick it up, it really is the way to play it. Is the way to play it. I know they did experiment to make Resident Evil on the portable systems, but this one right here, Resident Evil Deadly Science DS, is the way to play it. So it was really. Oh, and there was also a multiplayer mode where you can play as like every different character, including Albert Wesker, in like a gauntlet style, battle royale per se. So that was actually pretty interesting too. So next, we're almost done with this. Okay, this video is actually pretty long. With this being said, Resident Evil 7 and 8, okay, which is the Winter's storyline basically. Resident Evil 7 will get a A tier. Okay, this actually brought back the franchise after Resident Evil 6's kind of mess up. It brought back, the survival horror, in aside a, Texas Chainsaw Massacre-esque family that's out to get you and everything. So they changed the perspective to first person, and they actually did it well. It's like their progression from first person is what made them here is Resident Evil 7. From what they learned from the beginning to now. So, and it was a good choice because it felt claustrophobic. The storyline was like, if you were new to the franchise, you can start here if you want, and then you can go work your way backwards to figure out more of the storyline, because the ending of the game might have confused you a little bit or so. So with that being said, though, gameplay great, story, if you were a longtime fan and you knew what was going on more and more when they were uncovering more stuff, that was even great. You learned about more of like the connections. You learned more about the umbrella as well, what they were doing still behind the scenes here and there. There was a nice little Easter egg to Alyssa Ashcroft, who's the daughter, is the main character in Requiem now. So, but yeah, there was a lot of things that was very innovative about this game. The DLC was also great. With the final one being the end of Zoe, with what was his name? Jack Baker's brother. Shoot, I forgot his name, but he was a badass. He was a badass. Let's just say that. So, he was basically punching things with his fist. He was punching the mold with his fist. But with that being said, Resident Evil 7 was a rebirth of the franchise, So, and with Resident Evil 8, when that came out, which continued the Winter storyline, I'm teetering between A and B. because it lost some of the survival horror. It wanted to copy Resident Evil 4. You know, it's not a bad thing to do. It copied Resident Evil 4 and with the cache case management and stuff like that, but it lost some of its identity because of that. So with the whole survival horror aspect of it, and then like the only good portions were, in my opinion, was the Demetres Castle and Benevento's little mind trick games. But like Benevento and Dr. Moreau. Oh, I say Dr. Moreau. I know that's a movie, but Monroe, Monroe. Can't say my name now. Moreau. Both of those sections were very short because the only two big long sections was Demetres Castle and Heisenberg's factory, which that level sucked. It was long, it was boring, and the enemies were annoying. You know, compared to the Lycans, those enemies were annoying, and I hated that portion. The boss fights, they were actually not bad, but they were kind of underwhelming, except for like Benevento's. Hers was actually pretty nice. Demetres was a gigantic dragon, basically, you know, fish monster and electric magneto blob thing that looks like something that came from Akira, you know. So Resident Evil Village was interesting, but again, the pacing was fine. They put the best thing first and the worst thing last. And when you got to the last portion, I mean, it was long. To me, it was painfully long and boring, you know. Because one, it was the enemies, and the two, the stupid objectives you had to do. So it wasn't. That's what brings this one down quite a bit, you know. Was a lot of the gameplay, you know. Gameplay was good for what it's worth, but I think it lost a little bit of the identity, and then it became action packed again when Chris Redfield came back into it, which makes sense, but it became a war zone at that point, and you know, I'm like, am I playing Call of Duty now? You know. So, and I understand Chris Redfield is, you know, the military side of things in terms of, you know, the BSAA, you know, STARS, you know, that police force and all that stuff. But, like, they made it too military. You know, same thing with Reasonable 6. It was you know, they made them too military. You know, they made them into war zones, basically. While, like, you know, since Resident Evil 3, let's say go back to Resident Evil 3 Nemesis. You know, that was a war zone right there. And since that was a war zone, but you played as one character. And yeah, it was action packed, but it wasn't as action packed as 6 or Village per se. So I digress on that. Okay. Before I start on the actual remake trilogy and stuff like that, there's a few of them I actually did forget here and there. And and I'm gonna get these out of the way because they're pretty quick, is Resident Evil RE-Verse. I skipped out on that. I did not play that at all. Umbrella Corps I played, it sucked. And Resistance, it was a fun little mastermind, or like Dead by Daylight or Mastermind. That's what they call it, or I forgot what the bad guy was called, the Mastermind. But it was a decent Dead by Daylight. I know people still play it nowadays. Is the better of the Resident Evil Online games. Well, I shouldn't say that because Outbreak is the best, to me, is the best Resident Evil Online games though. But for what it's worth nowadays, in this era of gaming that we're in right now, Resident Evil Resistance actually was not bad. Umbrella Corps sucked, and when I saw the gameplay for RE-Verse, I skipped out on that. I did not want to play it at all. And then I forgot about Umbrella Chronicles. And with Umbrella Chronicles, I'm going to give it a C. If you had friends, it made the game tolerable. If you played by yourself, it wasn't fun. It really wasn't fun. You actually have to play with friends to enjoy the game. You know, at least two other friends. You know, try to get three of you, because again, it to me it was SOCOM. Like if anyone remembers those games, the SOCOM franchise, U.S. Navy SEALs, it was SOCOM with Resident Evil. Which again, the people who made this Resident Evil Operation Raccoon City was Slant Six Games. Was it Slant Six Games? Yeah, it was Slant Six Games who made SOCOM Confrontation. So it had a lot of the same movements and cover systems and things of that nature. So, and it felt like it had some of the same HUD to a certain degree. It had some uniqueness here to it, though. But it was a nice way to experience a certain part of the story. But I don't think it's canon, honestly. But if they remade this game and retold it to fit into the whole overarching of it, then they could probably put it into a canon. And I wouldn't mind actually a remake of Operation Raccoon City and make it better. Make it a better first person shooter. Or not first person shooter, third person shooter. Make it a better third person shooter. Make it a better game, you know. And make it so that you can actually play by yourself without issues, you know. And you don't have to play with friends. But if you play with friends, it'll make the game better. But again, with the original Operation Raccoon City, if you play with friends, it made it a lot more enjoyable. It was cool to see different aspects. Like you were able to see Mr. X. You were able to see Nemesis. You were able to see Birkin. Like you fought every creature from, if not every single Resident Evil game from, well, not every single Resident game, but you know, during the Raccoon City incident, you know, from 2, 3, the Outbreak series, you fought some, you know, some of the unique creatures, you know, that, you know, they created for it. So, but again, it was just another generic third-person shooter, third-person cover shooter, SOCOM with Resident Evil. That's basically what it was. So, with that being said, the 3 remake trilogy per se, okay? Resident Evil 2 remake is going into A tier. I'm putting into A tier here, okay? With that being said, there was a lot of different aspects of Resident Evil 2 remake that I did love. It just didn't for me personally. The original Resident Evil 2 had a lot more replayability. Like, I understand they had updates for this game. They had tons of different things to do for this game, with the Stories DLC, the Fourth Survivor, Tofu Survivor, and all that stuff. Like, yeah, that's great add-ons and stuff. But I wish they kept the Leon A and Claire B, or Claire A and Leon B scenarios and stuff, and changed up certain things here and there, you know. And yeah, they had unique bosses overall to a certain degree, but there's certain things that just felt like even though it happened on Leon's side, it still happened on Claire's side, and that's one thing I did not like. But I did like the expanded story, you know. The gameplay again was, you know, they're trying to evolve the Resident Evil franchise to more modern, you know, like trying to get a bigger audience involved, which I understand, you know. The whole fixed camera angles, you know, it's a relic of the past, but it's a nostalgic relic of the past, you know. And like, I still love the fixed camera angles, but a lot of people won't, you know. If they did that nowadays, some people might get turned off by it. I don't know. They haven't tried it. If they did try it, I mean, it would be great to see if they did and see what happens, you know. But they're still keeping with the first person and the third person perspectives of it. With Resident Evil 2, though, you know, it was a good evolution, you know, a good start from Resident Evil Village, you know, from, you know, having that third person over your shoulder. Graphically, great. Gameplay wise, great. Story wise, it expanded on things here and there. I still think Resident Evil 2 storyline was still good. compared to this one. So, but it's still serviceable. I know they have they're remaking the universe. It feels like they're remaking the Resident Evil universe. So, but with 3 though, I am gonna give it a B tier because it is a step below. It was a quicker game to beat. They cut so much content. Same thing with 2. They cut so much content. I don't like the design of Nemesis. I like the original design of Nemesis. He's a lot more grotesque, and I think he's a lot more menacing in Resident Evil 3 Nemesis than Resident Evil 3 Remake. You know, but like, and there was less backtracking compared to 3. To me, 3 had a lot of backtracking. This one, there was like only one section that was really open. Some sections were shortened. I feel like there was a lot less enemy variety as well. And the adventure was just quick. Like, very, very quick. So, sorry, my cat's making noise. And then finally, Resident Evil 4. And I said one of them is going to get the S rank. And Resident Evil 4 is, if not if Resident Evil 2 and 3 were like the first 2 that tested things out, Resident Evil 4 is what the original Resident Evil 4 should have been back in the day if it was made. You know, from the stuff they learned over the course of the whole franchise, this is really a good pinnacle for survival and action horror. It really did a good job in terms of gameplay of being fluid, but also not too action-packed like Resident Evil 6. You know, it kept a lot of the same systems of 4 and improved upon them. Story was expanded greatly compared to 4. You know, like, it gave Luis more spotlight. You know, I thought Luis died too soon. You know, it was nice to see him a lot more in the game. You know, and then also expanding on the Separate Ways DLC. You know, yeah, they changed some things here and there, which is great because, like, I'm trying to think what enemy. One of the enemies was removed from the original campaign and put in Separate Ways, which was a nice touch because I hated that enemy. I hated that portion of Resident Evil 4. There's certain parts of the original Resident Evil 4 I hated, which they removed, which is great because they changed it to something else or improved upon it some way, shape, or form. So, like, the trolleys, the tram system, when they were going from I think the castle, from the village to the castle, that portion sucked. It was so slow, it was so boring, and it was unnecessary. They removed that. So there was a lot of good positives for remake, and it's really, for me, it's really high regarded, and I actually do still play that game. And once Resident Evil Requiem comes out, I will install it so that I can play Requiem. So with that being said, since Resident Evil Requiem ain't out yet, never played yet, so I just put it on there just for shits and giggles. But overall, though, this is my tier list. If you agree with it, great. If you don't agree with, that's fine too. Show me, what, like, do you agree with it? Or do you have a different opinion upon it? Do you have a fond memory of a certain one? Like I said, my most fond memories are Resident Evil 3, Resident Evil 5, and the Outbreak series. So, and those are all A tier because the first Resident Evil 3 got me into Resident Evil. Resident Evil 5 was a great co-op experience, and then online, Resident Evil Outbreak File 2 was online. The S rank ones were just phenomenal games that offered great variety, great gameplay, overall improvements. So, to the actual franchise. Yeah, they had some duds, like the whole D tier, those were duds, like some of them might like them. I just didn't, okay? Same thing with the C tiers. These are just, to me, these are really generic compared to, what B, at least with B, with the B tier stuff, a lot of these were generic. They had their flaws, they had their flaws, but they were still good playable games. So, and so on and so forth. So, with Resident Evil Requiem just around the corner, releasing this month, You know, I just wanted to make this tier list, get this out there, and see what you guys think. So hopefully you enjoy the video. Like, comment, subscribe, and I'll actually see you guys. And actually, I'll be most likely streaming and actually doing a walkthrough of the first time I'm playing Resident Evil Requiem. So hopefully you enjoy that in the upcoming near future, and I'll see you guys very soon.